All right. Well, today I wanted to check out this article and kind of just talk a little bit about this question. For some reason, in the Republican presidential primary race, the the question of the Civil War, the the story of the Civil War, the history of it, the question of American racism has been very frequent recently. Uh, Former presidential contender Ron DeSantis spoke on it. Nikki Haley spoke on it, and I saw this particular article several days ago, and I thought, well, this is interesting because I paid attention in my history classes, and I get the I got the my takeaway from American history, especially um, in immediately following the Civil War. It seemed like America might have been a racist country, and I before I really go too deep into this, I don't. I'm not going to do like a full, you know, history of American racial division. I'm gonna look at what she said, look at what one of her staffers said, and then just like look at a couple bullet points I think show that at least institutionally, which I think is how you would define whether or not a country is racist. I think that it's pretty obvious. I think you have to really try and pretend like America wasn't like I don't know how you can say that America is never a racist country. You could try to make the argument that it currently is not one. I think a lot of people would disagree with that, but there's at least some kind of evidence that you can use to try to prove that point. But to say that America has never been one, you know, it's yeah. Anyways, let's go ahead and just jump through this article from CNN titled "Haley says the U.S. has never been a racist country." So, um, worth noting Nikki Haley, I believe, is of Indian descent. Um, I believe that's in here somewhere. Daughter of immigrants. So you know, anyway, here we go. We're not a racist country, Brian. We've never been a racist country. Our goal is to make sure that today is better than yesterday. Are we perfect? No, but our goal is to always make sure we try and be more perfect every day that we can. So it's really it's weird wording. We've never been a racist country, but we're trying to make sure today's better than yesterday. We're not perfect. So like it obviously she's implying there is a checkered past, but is downplaying it. And then um, you know, I faced racism when I was growing up, but today's a lot better than it was then. Like obviously it is. But again, still, sticking to the whole downplaying of don't divide people on race, which is uh, if you get upset by history, I mean, that's kind of like your own problem. I mean, the fact that slavery existed or that Jim Crow laws existed, it it's just history. It's a thing that happened. You don't have to like feel insulted or upset because something happened. But moving on to one of her campaign staff members says, America has always had racism, but America has never been a racist country, which is probably one of the many dumb things that I have heard in this wonderful thing we call American politics. Liberal media always fails to get that distinction. It can throw a fit, but it doesn't change Nikki's belief that America is special. Um, yeah, so there's a distinction to be made between America being racist and then America having racism. Anyways, yeah, uh, let's just jump into the first thing. This is just an article, little, blurb, I guess, from the History Channel. Um, Talks about black codes, which were instituted shortly after the end of the Civil War, you know, and the abolition of slavery, because, well, some people weren't too happy about that, and you know, they still wanted a way or means to control, uh, and so, through some other means, the people that they had previously controlled. You know, Ku Klux Klan. you know, there's that. Jim Crow. I mean, I'm just going to run through this. I'm not really going to explain every single point. Jim Crow laws, separate but equal. Black people stick to their area, white people stick to their area. No intermingling. Uh, you know, complete separation. And this was supposed to be better for everyone. Of course, the standards on each side are vastly different. There's some cases where I want to say it was either in the early 50s or maybe sooner than that, where the Supreme Court argued that if you want to do separate but equal, fine, but you have to stick with the equal part. And I want to say it might have been Virginia, where the governor said he'd rather not have any education at all than bring black schools up to par with white schools. I think it was Virginia. It could have been somewhere else, but you know, separate but equal. Yeah, great, great stuff. Uh, Ida B. Wells. Honestly, I don't remember. First class train car. Oh, yeah. Well, that's more of the separate but equal stuff. It's separate separate transit. There's a lot of people here I don't know about. Guess I didn't pay attention to all of history, but anyways, these are just a few interesting things. Lynchings increased and race riots. Speaking of lynchings, here's a bar graph of lynchings of African Americans between the 1890 and 1929. You can see it went down, which is a good thing. But why was it so high around this time? This is, that period 1890 to 1909, or even up to 1919. That's a period when you see a lot of those Confederate memorials and Confederate statues rise up. And it was kind of like the great reawakening of, in some ways, I guess, white supremacism, or the myth of the lost cause, that whole crap. It's about the same time period, actually, between 1910 1919 is when Woodrow Wilson, he airs that movie at the White House. I forget what it's called, but it's you know quite racist. I wonder if it's on this. It might be. It might not be. I really don't know. I don't remember. It was a really weird movie. I think it had blackface in it. It was very, very racist, depicting black people in a particular way. And of course, this is a movie that aired in the White House. The White House, right, where the president lives and operates, and it was aired for the president. Okay, so anyways, moving on. Um, Here's an important part. This is moving forward a little bit, 1940s. So after World War II, there were a lot of where there's this GI Bill. It provided basically home loans, and it was basically a way to settle down, start a family, all that good stuff. But the problem for black people was that they couldn't get home loans. And the reason why was because new suburban developments were segregated, and black people weren't allowed to move there. So they couldn't get a loan to move to these white neighborhoods, which in many cases they're just, was it the land deed stipulated that you couldn't sell to a non-white person, or if you did try to move there, you'd get run out by the residents. And so the only option would be to stay in urban cores, where the majority of the black population was now at. But these areas were marked as unsafe for mortgages by insurance companies. So you couldn't get a mortgage to buy a home in the suburbs, and you couldn't get a mortgage to buy a home in the urban core due to redlining. So you're stuck renting, or, you know, basically not owning a home. And so, a lot of families bought homes during this time, 1950s, the post-war baby boom, that's, the stereotypical, everyone's got their own front lawn and the backyard, the white picket fence, and, the grill out back, the cookouts, and then they had assistance. A lot of people had assistance through the GI Bill. Even people that didn't, they had at least the opportunity to buy homes, live the American dream. But that dream wasn't afforded to the majority of Black people. And so that's just something to keep in mind. Now, in the mid 50s, we get Brown versus the Board of Education, which is the Supreme Court case that basically said separate but equal is uh, not cool. Got to get rid of it, right? And so it was something like what 134, oh, nearly 100 Southern politicians basically signed the Southern Manifesto in an agreement to resist the implementation of Brown. You know, senators calling for the massive resistance against a collection of laws passed in response to the Brown decision that aggressively tried to forestall and prevent school integration. Um, Basically, the point being is that the Supreme Court said you couldn't do segregation, and a whole lot of politicians, in the Senate, in governors' positions, state state Congress. I mean, we had a lot of people resisting the Supreme Court's decision here. The point I'm trying to make through these last few bills is that these are, whether it's the, the redlining when it comes to housing, or the uh, the not allowing Black people to purchase homes in suburbs, the resistance to integration in the 50s and beyond. These are institutional actions by sitting elected representatives, senators, governors. This is the state, in many cases, enforcing a very racist policy. Okay. Now, I know, a lot of people say like, "Oh, the Civil War ended slavery, racism ended," but if you look, it didn't just end. Things just changed. Moving on, um, home ownership. This is jumping into the future a little bit more. Talks about racial inequalities and housing affordability, home ownership trends. I think there's a chart in here somewhere. Home ownership rates increased 65% in 2021. Black Americans lag significantly at 44%. Only increased 0.4% in the last 10 years. 29% percentage points less than white Americans at 72%, representing a very large Black-white home ownership rate gap. Now, this is, this is in 2021, but this is a consequence of policies that goes back to those days of redlining and cutting off the suburbs to Black Americans. And, it because of this, I mean, on average, the Black family is now behind trying to catch up with white counterparts. And there we go. The ghost of housing discrimination reached beyond redlining. So this is this is something I've actually seen in my hometown of St. Petersburg. And well, not this particular, but basically what you see is, you know, you have pockets of areas that were segregated, in 1930 in Denver. Uh, the Black population is basically corralled right around here. Actually, I mean, you can still kind of see there's a concentration around here and a little bit over here, but this is actually surprisingly not as bad as some other cities. I think Detroit, I think, is currently probably the worst city in terms of segregation, because there you can see the urban core of Detroit would still look somewhat like this, much more dense, and with a surrounding of, predominantly white. It's like, I want to say that downtown Detroit core was like 80% Black, but then the suburbs were 80 to 90% white. So that's a very, and that's like, those are population statistics within the last 10 years. That's a uh, very bad trend. And it's how do you the only real nothing's really been done to mitigate this. It's just these changes have just been kind of natural. It's just as time moves forward, it does sort of solve itself in some areas better than others, but in some other areas worse than others. If you look at, I think St. Louis is still pretty rough in those regards. And see Baltimore. That's interesting. So here you kind of see a similar thing to what I was just talking about, where you can see where, back in the 1930s, you got a population density here and here with, whites on the outer areas. And then over here, you can see there's still high densities in the same areas, but it's also, it's scattered out quite a bit. So it's a bit more integrated, but still, you still see those population density cores. Anyways, all of that, well, kind of building off of the home ownership thing is the idea of intergenerational wealth, which is basically the the wealth that you inherit from your parents, which is was passed down from their parents, generally speaking, at least according to Capital One. But it's also just kind of common knowledge for the average family. The largest asset in that intergenerational wealth is property, home ownership. You know, you, your parent leaves you the house, you can live there, or you could sell it for X amount of money. Odds are the home accumulated some more value since it was purchased, so you make a good amount of money. But again, home ownership, we can go back to wherever that chart was, where home ownership is lagging for Black Americans because of those housing policies in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And so you have a big gap in generational wealth, and that kind of gets us to today, where there is still quite a wealth gap. So the point is that institutionally, maybe the country is not racist like it had been. Institutionally, there's more programs that probably help, non-whites try to catch up. But you can't just fix or undo decades of, you know, racist policies. The consequences of that is kind of, right here on this page. White and Asian households has vastly more wealth than other households. So that's, that's quite a it's quite a wealth gap. Asian households, but this was actually what kind of surprised me, was that Asian households had a median net worth of 320,000 compared to 250,000 for white households. Median households for Hispanic, 48,000, Black households, 27,000. That's significant. So yeah, so point is that history is important, recognizing that history is important. And I do think it's kind of ironic that the party that talks about not, don't erase the history of the Confederacy is so quick to erase the history of, racist policies. I mean, you can acknowledge that racist policies are enacted, and I mean, it's not like it's going to hurt you. It's just because I don't get it. Yeah, I don't understand it. Yeah. Anyways, that's the video. If you're still here, let me know if there's anything I missed that is worth noting. And if you think I'm wrong in that America never was a racist at all, um, please try to persuade me. I'm open to all arguments. But yeah, 'cause it seems pretty straightforward to me when I look at all of the institutional efforts taken in the immediate post-Civil War time period up until the 60s and 70s that were done to try to limit the growth and wealth of Black Americans. Man, they went through great effort to try to do that. So I just, yeah. Anyways, yeah. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. And once again, I forgot to click the stop recording button. I clicked the wrong button. All right. Goodbye.